All right, guys, we're gonna get going. I'm gonna come sit over there by you. No, you're fine. You're fine. She's good. Awesome. Tucker's been here before. We're glad to have him back. Appreciate you. You can kind of see the camera there where you're going to be seeing.
That's great. Yep.
What rules do you have for them online for CE?
So if you can just put your license number into the chat, that'd be great. Maybe at the beginning of class, all the participants, and maybe one at the end. We'll get your hours banked for you today, so they'll show up on your transcript here probably by early next week with the state. But that's pretty much it. We'll keep it simple, keep it easy.
Pass this around here in person.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, this is an important topic. I mean, we all need CE credit. That's kind of a bonus or whatever, but there's a lot of changes going on right now in the industry, and some of them have to do with settlements and commissions and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll get into some of that, maybe not, but let's just introduce yourself, Tucker, any way you want, and let's get up.
Oh, thanks. I'm Tucker. A lot of you have seen me before. I'm with Backman Title Services. Tomorrow is going to be my 24th year at Backman. So it's kind of a banner day for me. Anyway, I do a lot of CE classes for Backman Title. I do title and escrow. I help out on the IT team. Pretty much almost every job at the title company I've done before, except for typists for obvious reasons. I don't think I'm a very good typist, but yeah, we're going to get to it. We're going to talk about title and settlement. We'll go through this kind of quickly. A lot of you are experienced agents. As we go through this, though, we'll just start out with some basics. Oh, was that work too? Oh, look at you, Jeff, you're the man. We'll go through title and settlement. We'll get through some basic definitions, and then we'll just go through some things in here to make it easier for your buyers and for your sellers, right? How do you make them comfortable when you meet with them the first time, all the way until signing, until settlement. So let's go through settlement versus closing real quick, just based on our definitions here in Utah for those contracts. So we're going to talk about this type of possession rather than this type of possession. Like that's one of the main things. Yeah, that's a little scary one. I've had daughters look at me that way before. It happens.
Today.
Yeah, it happens sometimes, right? Careful. But let's look at our contract. So here's our residential REPC. It defines settlement basically as signing papers and money transferring hands. And closing is usually funding and recording. Now, it's that way on our residential contracts, right? After settlement and closing comes possession. And generally, that means at the time of recording, unless you put something else in the contract. And that works. I mean, that's what we're used to in the residential world. I want to caution you, though, if you're using a different contract, a builder contract perhaps, or if you get into the commercial world, these definitions can be a little bit different. So on our UAR commercial contract form, it defines settlement differently. It's kind of funny, it still defines things the way that we did on the residential contract prior to 2008, where it says each side is going to pay for half of the settlement escrow fees. That's not how we do it in Utah anymore, right, on the residential side. Also, it says closing means settlements completed, proceeds of new loan have been delivered, and the applicable closing documents have been recorded. So that's pretty much the same, but look at what it says in section 4 for possession. Is it how many hours after closing, meaning recording, or how many days after closing? When you get into the CCIM contract, the commercial contract that most of the agents will use here in the state of Utah, the commercial agents, settlements pretty much define the same way, okay, with money transferring hands and documents being transferred. However, possession is a little bit different. You've got 3 days from the time you sign as a buyer to get your money over. That's a little bit different, right? 3 days to get your money over. And then possession is actually 24 hours following recording or following closing. So technically the buyer has title to the property, but it's the seller's possession until 24 hours after. It doesn't say 1 day either, it's 24 hours after. That's something to keep in mind. So when you're just looking at these contracts, the regular residential contract that you know and love, it's probably going to be fine. You know, keep track of that section 4 about possession. If it's any other contract, make sure you understand what you're doing with your buyers and with your sellers. So let's look at some deadlines. Here's our general REPC. There's 4 of them there. There's seller disclosure, there's the due diligence deadline, there's financing and appraisal, and then there's settlement. As we move to the commercial contract, you lose one of those. Okay, you lose that financing and appraisal deadline. It's pretty much gone. So just even keeping track of those deadlines, it's really important. If you get into some more of these niche closings, like you're doing seller finance or owner finance or private finance, when you're doing an all-inclusive contract, those deadlines for just on that addendum are tied to the original REPC, and some of this stuff comes a lot sooner than you're used to. If you think about it as a buyer, you submit a contract to a seller and they're going to do owner finance and you're going to basically make the payments to an escrow company. Well, look, at the time of your offer, you're supposed to be giving them a buyer financial information sheet. And then before the seller disclosure deadline, which is usually, I don't know, 5 to 7 days usually, look what you have to have: underlying copies of the note, the water information, the fee breakdown. The title company or whoever's preparing the documents are supposed to have all the documents ready for the closing before the seller disclosure deadline. And that can be a little bit difficult. So if you need extra time on an all-inclusive trust deed or seller finance, it's important that you ask for it. Okay, the credit deadline, credit document deadline is the buyer due diligence deadline. So in theory, the buyer's supposed to give the seller a copy of their credit report. That's what the contract says. Now, we don't see that very often on these all-inclusive or seller finance deals. If you're not going to do it though, it's something to anticipate and maybe put on an addendum to the contract saying, hey, the buyer's not going to provide their credit report. Or if you need extra time to get that, that's something to think about as you're filling out the contract. One of the things that folks kind of forget about sometimes is just when they're writing an offer to really look at the calendar. Most of the time when a buyer submits an offer, they want to move in over the weekend, right? That's typically what we see, right? So your buyer will put in a contract and they'll say, hey, I want to move in over the 20th and 21st over that Friday, Saturday. And so the agent will put the settlement deadline on the 20th. Right, that's what they'll do. Now, here's the thing about these contracts, and we'll look at this a little bit later. On our contract, you have to complete that settlement before close of business, basically before 5 p.m. that day. So let's get into this situation. The buyer really wants to move in over the weekend, but the seller's not done moving out yet. The buyer might close Friday morning and the lender's ready to same day fund everything, but the only restriction the seller has is they have to complete settlement before 5 p.m. If you have a savvy listing agent whose clients still want to live in the house or have possession over the weekend, they'll just schedule their settlement for 4 o'clock or 4:30, complete the contract, and suddenly it's too late to record the documents. And you move that over. So my recommendation for folks, and again, I'm not a real estate agent, but I've seen this happen over and over again, is if you want to move it on a Friday, maybe have your settlement Tuesday or Wednesday. Okay, that lets the seller know well in advance they probably need to be out the weekend before. That makes your final walkthrough as a buyer a little bit easier. It also sets up that expectation. It's clear when they need to be out. And yes, that might mean, if you fund it the same day on a Wednesday, the buyer has to pay for 2 or 3 extra days of interest. Boy, if you ask buyers, would you rather pay 2 or 3 extra days of interest or live in the U-Haul or in your parents' basements for another 3 days or however they're going to do it? Most of the time it's the 2 or 3 days interest that win out. This is especially true when you're dealing with short sales or with REOs. You usually want to settle and close the week before you actually want to move in. That's just one of those things. So let's talk about when someone calls you to list their home on a seller's side. Let's think about that. So in the very beginning of things, okay, the realtors are very good at doing the valuation and the CMA. Most of the time, you can drive by a property in your neighborhood or somewhere where you've sold something and you pretty much know what things are going for. Okay, you have your MLS search sheets. When a new listing comes live and it's in that price area, you're right on it. You already know what the value is. Another couple things that an agent can do is to rely on the information, the tax information from the MLS. That's just one thing that you can do. Also, getting a copy of the plat map, and I recommend that agents get a copy of the abstract from the county. Now, in Utah County, the abstract or the title history is free. You can just go there whenever you want to and pull up that title history. That will tell you when the people took title and when those loans were originated with those original loan amounts. Okay, so you're an agent, you've got all this information. Hopefully you've gotten an abstract. If it's not available for free online like it is in Utah County, you call, text, or email your title company and say, hey, can you send me an abstract for this address, or better yet, this parcel number? And then you've got that in your back hip pocket, right? Right, you're getting ready for your listing. Sometimes it works that way where you have some time. Sometimes you're just at the grocery store and you're running to their house. But if you have time, get that abstract. Okay, the abstract will actually tell you who's on title right now. And if that person on the phone is different from the person on title, it prompts you to ask questions. Well, wait a minute, why are you calling me when these other person or these other people are on title? And you might get an answer like, well, this is my mom and dad's house and they passed away. Or you'll notice this is in a family trust, or this is in an LLC. It starts prompting those questions that you should be asking at the listing. So let's pretend you've done all this fun stuff. You know who the vested property owner is. You know the county tax amounts from the MLS or from the county directly. You know the original mortgage amounts. You've received an abstract. What can you do with that stuff? Well, here's an abstract, right? This is the abstract for my house. Okay, a little page from that there in Davis County here in Utah. Here's the deed when I took title to the property in 2002, and then you can see my original mortgage for $118,000. Boy, I really wish I only owed $118,000 on my house right now, but that was it in 2002. That's it. If you go forward in time, though, you can kind of see my last mortgages. In 2019, I had a first for $307,000. I've got a home equity line for $100,000. Now, I don't owe $100,000 on my home equity line, but it prompts you as a real estate agent to figure out that number one question that sellers have in their head. Sellers are going to ask you when you first meet with them, what is my house going to sell for? And what they really need to know is, how much am I going to net from the sale of my property? An abstract can also help you answer a number of questions, just from a disclosure and a due diligence perspective. So abstracts, every section of the REPC basically relates to what's the recent history of the property. On the Form 10, the seller disclosures, it can answer some of those questions as well. So you've gathered all this information. What I recommend that you do, and most of the great agents will do this, is they'll run a net sheet with their client. And there's a whole bunch of net sheets around. Backman has 2 or 3 different versions. And to be honest, if you have your own or another title company's, doesn't matter to me. Just get in the practice of using a net sheet. There's some really good ones out there. I'm going to put up on the screen an example of this is just Microsoft Excel. It's nothing like rocket science. But here's an example of our net sheet at Backman. It has 4 columns, so you can do 4 different sales prices. As you fill in the sales price, the realtor commission's figured out automatically. If it's not 6%, if it's going to be something different, you can actually change that to whatever percentage or whatever flat fee that you want to. If there's an administration or administrative fee with your company, you can add that in there as well. As you add the sales price, the title insurance figures out automatically. This will actually do a monthly tax proration as well. So if you know that tax amount from your MLS sheet or from the information you get from the county, well, lo and behold, you've got a monthly tax amount. That's not as good as what you get on a settlement statement. It's not a daily tax proration, but it's going to get you like within the ballpark. If you're going to pay for seller paid closing costs or home warranty, or if you're in Daybreak and there's a reinvestment fee, you can throw all that in there, and it's keeping track of, well, what's the net or what's the gross equity minus the cost. It will give you that bottom line. So I think we looked at this the last time I did a class here, and we used it for estimating deficiency for a short sale. The same thing applies. So we've got this Microsoft Excel version. It works great from a PC. I think you actually have a Google Sheets version that works pretty well as well. I can put it in the resources that you'll get after we bank your hours. We have an online version at Backman as well. So you can go to our website. It's about 1/3 of the way down on the property. It says Seller Net. It's the exact same math. It's just one column or one entry at a time, but that Seller Net sheet will work if you have any access to internet. It works just fine. And again, what are you doing when you go over a net sheet with your seller? Well, yeah, you're setting expectations. I mean, this happened all the time back in the day. I would go into a closing, I'd have a settlement statement, I'd show a seller, okay, here's your title and escrow costs. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? They didn't realize there were title and escrow costs, even though the agent had gone over that with them as their listing and then as an offer came in. Or I didn't realize the commissions were this much. That's like the worst statement you can have in a settlement, right? I didn't know it was going to be this much. A net sheet, again, helps set expectations. It also helps them figure out, okay, what am I going to be doing with this money? How much do I really have to distribute to heirs or to buy the next property? That's the number one question people have. Back when we've got a commercial version, it's not up online or anything like that. But the nice thing about the commercial net sheet is if there are multiple parcels, it figures out the tax proration on each of those parcels. And there's a second page to it or a second tab where you can put the deposits and rents in and the proration date. It'll figure out the rent roll information for you as well. It just transfers that to the front page, because that's another thing that people don't understand when they're selling a rental property. How do the rents and deposits and the prorated rents really affect my bottom line as a seller? Some sellers don't know that they have to transfer those deposits over to the new buyer. It's a closing cost. So, if you have need of something that, let us know. And as long as we're talking about calculators and rates, there are some sellers who can benefit greatly for just asking this question to your title company. Does your company or your underwriter offer a reissue rate? So at Backman, we have 3 different underwriters. We have First American, who's wonderful, and Old Republic, who's great, and we have a third one called Alliant, who's pretty awesome also. Old Republic, if you've purchased your property within the last 2 years, they'll do a prorated owner's policy that can save you a couple $100. With Alliant National Title, they might save you 40% on your title insurance. Okay, if it's been in the last 10 years since you've purchased or refinanced your property, it doesn't have to close with them, it can be any title company, you might save 20%. Now, 20% doesn't sound like that much, but if the title premium is $2,000, that's $400. It can be a big deal. So inquire about that. A lot of the agents that I work with, I just said, put it in your email signature when you submit an offer to the title company. When you do have a listing, just put it right there and say, can you offer my client a reissue rate? And it ends up saving their clients hundreds of dollars every time. If you're going to close at the same title company as the seller, it's worth it to ask if the title company offers a concurrent rate. So that same underwriter with Backman Title says, we'll give you one discount. So you can either do a reissue rate for the seller or a concurrent rate for the buyer. But that ends up saving buyers who get the concurrent rate a couple $100 on their closing costs, which can be a big deal, especially for first-time home buyers. It's a big deal for anybody, for me to save $200, but that's something to ask for as well. If we close at the same place, can we save that kind of money through a reissue rate? Okay, so this is one of the hills that I like to die on. We're going to talk about property types. So as you're listing the property and you're putting it on the MLS, there's one thing I want to caution you about. In Utah, we have 3 different property types, and that's it. Well, I guess there's a 4th if you can consider timeshares, but we're not going to talk about timeshares. This isn't a timeshare presentation. Thank the Lord for that. Okay, so let's talk about property types. So I've got 4 property types up here on the property. What would you call that? Anybody here in the room?
Detached single family.
Single family. How about that one? Multifamily. Okay. We've got agricultural. We've got commercial. One of these, could you call them a townhome? Townhome, condo. Here's the thing. In Utah, you are either a parcel, a lot, or a unit. You're a parcel if your property has never been subdivided. Never been subdivided, you're automatically a parcel, right? You're a lot if you have been subdivided. So for a subdivision, a PUD, a PRUD, a commercial subdivision, those are all considered lots. And units, we already know, are condominiums. So you're a parcel, you're a lot, or a unit. What we didn't see in there is townhome. Townhome it might be a building style. In some places, it's a zoning type for townhomes, maybe a shared wall, maybe something like that. But we've seen where townhomes can be condominiums, they can be subdivisions, they can be planned unit developments. It just depends on where you're at. So about, I don't know, a quarter to a third of every property in Washington County down in St. George area, they have townhome in the title. Some of them are condos, some of them are subdivisions, some of them are PUDs. So it's important to figure that out as you list things. Because how many times have you seen this before? You've got your first time home buyer. Okay, they only qualify for Utah housing or FHA. So you start showing them condos and townhomes. You write up your offer. Sorry, you don't show them condos. You start showing them, townhomes. You write up your offer. It gets accepted. You send it over to your lender, and they say, hey, this won't work because this is a condo. You say, no, this is a townhome. It says on the MLS this is a townhome. Here's the thing, townhome can be a condo. So just in your agent remarks as a listing agent, save yourself the headache of having an accepted offer on a townhome, or excuse me, on a condominium, and it not working out for your buyer. It's just one of those things. So again, townhomes is more of a building style or perhaps a zoning. As long as you're looking at these things, when you list a property and it's in an HOA, this is more and more of an issue because most new properties now, and it doesn't matter if it's a PUD or a single family residence or a condominium, they're going to have an owner's association. So this is on your handout, so you'll be able to see it. Utah actually has an HOA registry. Have you seen this before? If you just Google HOA registry Utah, the first thing that comes up will be this little thing, and you can put in part of the name of your association. So it seems like in Utah, it has to have the name Stone or Cedar or Ridge, Elk Ridge at Stone Mountain, Cedar Estates, something like that will be in there. And you can generally find who the president and who the officers of the association are with their phone number and sometimes their email address. If it's one of these properties that's managed by like FCS Community Management, which is just across the freeway over here, you'll know that as well, and you can figure that out. Now, obviously, you can ask a seller. You can just say to the seller, boy, oh boy, who are you making your HOA payments to? Sometimes sellers have no idea. They set up that automatic withdrawal from their account, and that's the only thing they ever do, right? The other thing that you can do, and I recommend this all the time, is call your title company and ask them, hey, have you done another closing in this condo unit or in this condo or in this subdivision? And if we have, chances are we already know who the HOA contacts are. We know what the transfer fees are, and we know what the prorations were the last time we did a closing. The other day we had a guy call us up for a property in Ogden. He's like, I can't get a hold of the HOA. I don't know what to do. I said, well, what's the address or what's the name of the development? I looked it up and we'd done a closing just last year. I said, oh, for that closing, it looks like the HOA contact was this person, this was a transfer fee, and this was the monthly amount, and suddenly they knew where to start. And it can be funny with condominium management or HOA management because sometimes you're dealing with like FCS Community Management, and sometimes you're dealing with Dorothy, who's been the secretary of the HOA for 30 years. It just depends. Ask your title companies if they've done other closings. That's just a shortcut. It's a little bit of a hack for you. So as you're filling out your seller disclosures, you're disclosing what those HOA fees might be, right? Hopefully you're getting that straight from the horse's mouth. The other part of this is if you're in Utah, there are certain requirements, disclosure requirements, when there's an HOA involved. And sometimes we skip over them because we just don't know what they are. So for a property that's in an HOA, you should include the articles of incorporation for that HOA. That's part of the governing documents, as well as the bylaws, the CC&Rs. And the other thing that people forget about is the plat. So the dedicated plat will have covenants, conditions, and restrictions on it as well. So those things will come. The thing that most people don't think about, though, is Utah actually has an HOA Bill of Rights. Have you seen this before? No one knows about it. Buried into our state code, there's a little requirement that says if you're a seller and you're in an owner's association, by law you have to give buyers a copy of the HOA Bill of Rights. And no one's heard of it, right? So if you Google HOA Bill of Rights, it takes you to this 8 or 9 page document that's there from the Department of Commerce, and you just send that over, or you send them a link to that education. The HOA Bill of Rights is kind of fun because it goes over what the HOA has the right to do and not do, and it goes over your rights and responsibilities as a member of a homeowners association. So it'll actually say here, hey, the HOA can't charge you any more fees than this much per month per per act, I guess. Okay, it'll say things like the HOA can't stop you from displaying a flag. The HOA cannot stop you from doing these different things. It'll actually say the HOA meeting minutes have to be public. So there's some people who have been, what's the right word, abused by their HOA. We'll just put it that way. How's that? And we see these things like, if that's a side of TikTok that I go down all the time, the HOA fights. I don't know why I think it's so much fun. But if you've been on that side of TikTok, you know what I'm talking about. Utah has this HOA Bill of Rights. It's probably a good thing for them to review, along with these other things that include the Articles of Incorporation, the plat, the CC&Rs, and the bylaws. Also, the financials are part of that process. So it's hard to believe, but we have a 2-hour CE class on HOAs and CC&Rs. It sounds terrible, I know. It's actually probably more fun than this class. Just saying, because we look at some CC&R covenants that are just kind of wild. I love it when I see an overhead map on a listing. I mean, it's one thing to be able to pay for a drone. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. But you can get free overhead maps from the county or from the state of Utah. This is one of my favorite websites. It's called parcels.utah.gov. It has the parcel overlays for the entire state of Utah. And again, this will be on your handout. Parcels.utah.gov is the place. And it's basically statewide. Now, there are a few counties that are a little bit behind on the drama here a little bit. If you're down in Sanpete County, if you're in Manti, their stuff isn't really that up to date. They're getting better as technology gets better, but even up in Morgan County, if you're in Emery County, the parcel maps are pretty updated. They're at least within a year of when the parcels were last taken over. Getting a copy of the plat as part of seller disclosures. Make sure you're not getting an ownership plat from the county. If it's been subdivided, get that subdivision map. Okay, the subdivision or official plat has notes on it that probably don't exist on just a simple tax plat from the county. So here's an example of a lot. As you zoom in, it says, okay, here's your typical 7-foot easement, but there's a 20-foot setback here across this road. Okay, there are others that will show things like, oh, well, don't worry about this little area. This is just where the Wasatch Fault runs through your property and where you can build and not build. And here's the next fault line, and here are easements. Those don't show up on a tax plat. Like, the temptation for a title company and for everybody is to just get the cheapest plat available from the county. What you really want is that one that's been through planning and zoning. Most sellers, when they're filling out their seller disclosures, they're just telling you the things that they know about as part of boundary lines and easements. And the buyer's going to get a copy of a title commitment. And these title commitments now, they're hyperlinked so you can see the easements, but you know what? It's better to see it visually. It's better to see it on the screen. So as you get your listing agreement signed as an agent, it's great to start to prepare yourself for settlement as well. That means prepare for offers that are coming in. Get copies of the HOA and CCRs. Figure out that information. We've seen the HOA registry and these change of ownership fees. Disclosing what those might be on your agent remarks or on a separate document that's attachable through the MLS. I have here a little map. This is the work that Backman Title did for a couple of years. This is just up in Davis County. All those little marks or all those little pins are properties we did closings on, right? Properties that we already know what the HOA information is, in other words. So ask your title companies. This is not particular or unique to Backman. Every title company will have information like this, okay? When your listing agreement is signed, well, you've got a few things on the seller disclosures to handle right away. Hopefully they've already started to fill out those seller disclosures. I remember when it was 2020 and it was like, okay, offers in on the property the day after we list it, and we haven't even ordered the title report yet, or we requested it, it's not back yet, and the seller disclosures were due in 3 days. There's all these different things. Hopefully now we have a little bit more time with this. So a copy of the title commitment, we'll come back to it. Again, before the sale of any lot, the governing documents, here's that part of the code I mentioned earlier that says a link or access point to the department's education materials. That's that HOA Bill of Rights. Another thing that we deal with more and more often are water rights and water shares. So we'll see this in a contract. This is an example of an agent who on the water service, it said per title. Now for water rights and water shares, that's probably not the best way to give instructions to a title company because our searches don't include searches for water rights or water shares. If we see them on a document, we'll call attention to them on the commitment, but we don't ensure the transfer of water rights. And when you're looking at your listing agreements, your contracts, generally what you're looking for are evidence of water rights or shares that are the culinary or irrigation for that property. So the seller disclosures will ask you some simple questions, like this is the one from the CCIM or commercial contract. Where do you get your culinary water from? Who provides it? Is it a private well? If it is, what's the water right number for that well? And the state of Utah actually has several resources in regard to water rights. One of them is at waterrights.utah.gov. It's the online map. It's one of my favorite resources because all these little things that you can see up on the screen, those are registered water rights or wells within the state of Utah. You can plug in a parcel number. You can plug in the address. It will take you right to the property. As you click on those little red dots, it'll actually tell you who has that water right and what it can be used for. The seller disclosure portion can be taken care of with 3 clicks on this website. Okay, the water right exists, here's the name of it, and here's what the water can be used for. Lo and behold, on the seller side, your disclosures are done with. It makes it super simple. If the seller's using irrigation water, you can search for the canal company or from the water company as well. Okay, if you're using the purchase and sale agreement or a REPC, these are questions following up on what the seller sends you that you should probably ask. So this is kind of a buyer due diligence thing. How do I access the water? How much does it cost? Is the irrigation canal or the water shares, are they accessible through my property or is there some sort of easement that I need to record? Is there a transfer fee? How much does that cost? What are my responsibilities as an owner of a water share company, as a stockholder? The sellers on their disclosures, again, they're only going to tell you who provides it, okay, and are you aware of any problems? Is this the government? Is this a private well? Or is this a water share company and are there problems? Anything else the buyer needs to know? If it's me and I'm writing an offer on a property that has weird water, I'd like to put something like this on a purchase and sale agreement or on an addendum to the contract. Now, our REPC on the very front page says all water rights and water shares that are the primary source of culinary and irrigation water are automatically included. That's kind of what the REPC says. I don't know if that's very good instructions. So, with the permission of your broker, it's a great idea on an addendum as a seller or to buyer to say, hey, these water shares or water rights with this share company are included. If they're going to included, they're going to be transferred at closing by whatever the practice is for that water share company. And who's going to pay the transfer fee? It's funny because we do that with HOAs, right? We talk about what those fees are. We're not really good yet at disclosing those fees for water rights and for water share companies. Okay, when we see something like that on a contract, what we'll generally do is we'll put it on a bill of sale so there's evidence that those things transferred as part of closings. But to transfer the water shares, usually you have to sign a stock certificate. And sometimes the seller has lost their stock certificate and they have to order a new one. And they don't come very cheap and they kind of take a little bit of a long time. So these are questions on a listing side for the very beginning to make sure they have their share certificate. For water rights, boy, if there's a well doing for culinary or irrigation, here's some sample language for that. We're going to include the water rights. We're going to transfer them the way the state has set forth. We're going to use a land deed addendum to water rights, and we're going to transfer the well and well equipment. Isn't that funny? So a water right is your right to access the state of Utah's water. A well is a point of diversion. They're 2 different things. A water right will transfer. It's pertinent generally to the property. A well is usually personal property, especially the well equipment. And it doesn't necessarily transfer. You have to ask for the well equipment separately. I think of it a lot like a hot tub, like a detached hot tub, right? Obviously, that's personal property. The seller could detach the hot tub and take it to their new house. If you think about accessing water under the ground, it's the same thing. It's just a well pump moving water from one location to another. It's probably personal property. Okay, so as a buyer, you're asking, okay, what can I do with this stuff? Where I would begin is just this little acronym I came up with on my very own. It's called QUAC. What's the quantity of water I have access to? How can I use it? How can I access it? And what's the water quality? The biggest section on the buyer due diligence form is about water. That's the number one thing. So I've taught a water rights class in a couple different counties here recently. I did it out in Uintah County. So I was in Vernal for their Association of Realtors out there, and they're having problems in the Ashley Valley Water Conservancy District. They have a moratorium on building and building permits because there's not enough water to supply to new homes. That's an issue that they're having out there. Is this happening everywhere? Yeah, if you want to develop property in Tooele County right now, the county will not give you, or the city, excuse me, and the county won't let you subdivide things unless you have water that you can deed back to the city. You can't develop. Farmington City has the same rules. Just because you own land doesn't mean you can automatically have a subdivision anymore. You need to have water that's available. In Washington County right now, it's possible to buy a dry lot. So a developer will subdivide a whole section of property out there. On the plat map, it says, okay, if you buy one of these lots, it doesn't mean you have access automatically to water anymore. You don't get assigned your water until you apply for a building permit, and you can't get your building permit until you're actually ready to build. So you've got to be very, very careful when it comes to these water information things. We're going to skip over this about transferring water rights or water shares. We've got another class about that we can go over. One of the non-disclosure disclosures, I call it that way because it's on the contract, but no one really thinks about it. It's section 13. It says authority of the signers. So you've seen this before, right? If somebody has an LLC or a corporation or partnership, you can go to the Department of Corporations and look and see where the mail is going for free. And for $1, you can figure out who the general partners or limited partners are. I think just actually the general partners or the members or managers of an LLC. So that's kind of a thing that gets assigned to the escrow officer. Okay, as a notary, I actually don't have to worry so much. Just being a notary, I don't have to worry about authority and capacity. The only thing I need to really worry about is, does the name on the signature line match the ID? As long as those two things match, as a notary, I'm not in trouble for doing anything. So I could, as a notary, I could have a quitclaim deed and notarize it from myself as Secretary of the Interior of the United States for all of Dartmouth National Park. And my notary's not going to get in trouble for notarizing the document as long as my ID matches the signature line. Now, I'm not the Secretary of the Interior, right? An escrow officer has an additional bit of liability for that. The escrow officer actually has to look at the authority of that entity. They need evidence that I would be the Secretary of the Interior, for example. So we do things sometimes with corporate resolutions or with LLC documents. There's another couple of things on here that says, oh boy, if you are listing the property, you can't have further financial encumbrances appear and you can't change your management agreements. This can be a thing sometimes. If you've listed the property and you have a maintenance contract or you have a property management contract, you're not supposed to change those mid-listing without informing the buyer, because a lot of those agreements, they survive closing, right? You might have to inherit a maintenance contract as the buyer. Okay. When it comes to family trust, we're going to ask for that also. If anybody has passed away, we'll look at the family trust or certification of trust. Or if it's a probated item, we're going to look at the letters testamentary and a death certificate from the county. So after your listing agreement is signed, one of the things that you should first do is order a title commitment. First, ask your sellers, do you have a preference on where you do the closing? If they say yes, follow what they want to, because under RESPA, it's their opportunity to choose. If not, then maybe you can help them choose a great title company. Order the commitment before the buyers are party to the transaction. And you do that because there are some things that just kind of happen that they don't tell you about. Sometimes the seller doesn't know there's a boundary line issue or an issue with the ownership or judgments against the seller they would rather not have the buyer know about. I had a listing agent who went to it, husband and wife. They were sitting on the couch next to each other, holding hands. It was all lovey-dovey. The listing agreement gets signed. He sends us the title commitment request. We send it back to him. As soon as it's done, no buyers have come out, and they are getting divorced. She's like, I had no idea. They were sitting right next to each other on the couch. I don't know why they're getting divorced. It was one of those kind of weird things. Sometimes sellers forget to tell you stuff. Okay, some of that can be foregoed by just looking at the abstract. You can figure a lot of things out, but there are other things that don't show up on an abstract that you won't know until the commitment comes out. So as the commitment comes back, that PR or title report from the title company, just look at it. Make sure the people on title are actually those that sign the listing agreement, right? If not, then it's a question of why not. Look for at Schedule B for the requirements section. Is there anything in here that's a surprise? Anything like a boundary line agreement? We're dealing with a property, or I dealt with a property last week where UDOT had taken 20 feet of the property to expand a highway. And it's an issue because when UDOT took the 20 feet, they described the 20 feet that they took really, really well. What they didn't do is describe the remainder portion that was remaining with our home seller. And now the county has written a description that doesn't close for taxation purposes. That requires a survey. Okay, the listing agent had put the property up on the MLS. They had waited until a buyer came along in order to order the title commitment, and then the title company working on it had come back with a survey exception. The property had been listed for 2 months. If they had just ordered the commitment at the time of listing, they probably could have the survey done and had it resolved. Now he's like, well, they want to close July 8th. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. The title company you're working with is right. This needs a survey. And you can't get that done in 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. On a buyer's side, you want to look at the permanent things like the CCRs and reservations, the easements and things like that. When that offer comes in on the seller side, hopefully you're already prepared. You've already got the seller disclosures that are necessary. You can update the title commitment with the buyers and with the updated sales price. Rather than doing a net sheet, you can actually call your escrow officer and say, hey, we did this net sheet. Why don't you do a settlement statement? If you think about that from a seller side perspective, when an offer is received, well, the commissions are usually set in stone already. The title and escrow fees aren't going to change. If we know the closing dates, well, the prorations aren't going to change either. If we have the HOA dues, well, the only way that changes is if the seller makes a payment. It's the same thing with their mortgage. So from the time of an accepted offer to settlement, that settlement statement for the seller shouldn't change by that much. And if or when it does, it's usually the seller's, well, you don't want to say fault, but it's something the seller has done to change it. And wouldn't that be a lot easier for a seller to come in having already looked at the settlement statement and already verified the numbers? It's interesting because we do that with buyers already. Okay, now when I say we, I mean big we, like our industry does that. Like the CFPB requires if they're getting a loan, they get a closing disclosure 3 days prior to settlement, so the buyer's comfortable with that. We don't have that same rule on a seller side. I wonder if we should. It seems like a great idea. So we're about halfway through class. I think we're going a little too fast. I'm going to go slower. Just kidding. I'm actually kind of tired. I know everybody probably watching is like, yeah, seriously, Tucker, come on. Let's talk about buyers. Let's go back to our calendar. When we talk about that weekend move, again, Tuesday, Wednesday is the day to schedule your settlement. And we went through that scenario. This is just kind of what the contract says about settlement and closing. It says the actions have to be completed no later than 4 calendar days after settlement. That's kind of on the seller side. If you need your money by a certain time, on the seller side, well, maybe you're looking at that calendar and that you need your money by that Friday to move on your house. You should probably maybe mandate that the buyers close then to make sure that they're not going to use those full 4 days. It can be used against the seller as well. Okay. When you're looking at these forms, this is kind of how I think about them. The buyer due diligence form, the REPC, and the seller disclosure form. The seller disclosure form is more about what's happening right now and what I know about in the past. On the REPC, it's kind of just right now. What are the CCNRs? What's the title commitment? The buyer due diligence form is kind of, well, from what I know or what I want to do on the property, here's things I should look at. And all 3 of those forms are really to keep you guys from getting in trouble as real estate agents, especially that buyer due diligence form. How many of you have questions that are asked from a buyer that they should ask to an expert? Yeah, questions about water rights, questions about legality, questions about, can I put an ADU in here? Can I convert this garage to an apartment? These are all questions that are on that buyer due diligence form. Okay, I want to subdivide this 5-acre parcel with one house on it. Can I do that? Well, I don't know. Do you have enough water? I mean, all these questions are on that buyer due diligence form. Now, I'm going to give you the understatement of the day. Working with a good lender matters when you're working with a buyer. So if you've had closings with a quote unquote bad lender, you know, you've had those before. I had a closing that was set. It was awful, actually. It was a terrible experience for everybody involved. I'll just give you the brief history of it. It was one of these transactions that was a chain reaction, right? And we were the middle deal. Like there's 4 or 5 deals all lined up. They're all supposed to fund and close on the same day. We had people buying and selling out of state. All the things that you can think about were happening, and our buyers were right in the middle of it. So they're selling a house, doing that settlement, and they're doing the settlement for the purchase of their new house at the exact same time. And we've been hearing from the buyer's lender, documents are imminent. So originally we had settlement scheduled at like 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, the documents didn't come from the lender yet. Well, that's weird. So we moved it to 1, and then we moved it to 3, and then we moved it to 4. At 4 o'clock, we're closing the seller side, the sale of their property, and we're talking with the loan officer who's there in the room with us and the realtor, and I'm saying, hey, in order for this thing to go, we need your money from your sale, plus you're under contract with that buyer. What do you think? They're like, well, we have to sell our house. So we signed the documents to sell their house. In about 20 minutes, they were uploaded to the county and recorded, and they were homeless. At 4:45, the lender who had left calls them on the phone and says, I can't qualify you. Can you imagine that? You no longer qualify for your mortgage. Now, there's a couple things that happened. One, the lender had waited to do the full underwrite until the week before closing because they were floating the rate, hoping the rate would go down, they get more on the backside. The second thing that happened was the buyer went out and bought new tires for their truck and financed them. They couldn't wait an extra week. And it's all the agent's fault. So it's Friday. We're in the middle of the transaction. They're homeless. They're going to live in their parents' driveway, basically, in their fifth wheel. And the lender says, hey, I'm going to put you in a new loan program. Let's schedule this thing for Monday at 10 a.m. So everybody comes back to the office Monday, 10 a.m. Everything is there except for the documents. They weren't there. It was the same thing that happened until finally 3 o'clock, the lender calls them and says, I can't qualify you under any program. You don't qualify for this house anymore. So think about the 3 transactions down the line that affected. They're homeless. They're living in their parents' driveway, right, with the 2 dogs and the 3 kids. Oh my gosh. They have all the sale from the sale of their home, the proceeds from the sale of their home, but they can't qualify for anything else. What happened to their $15,000 of earnest money on their new property?
Didn't get that back.
It's gone. It was a $15,000 mistake because the lender waited too long to get them qualified, and 2, they bought tires for their truck. Isn't that crazy? Oh, it makes me sick every time I think about it. But a good lender is going to tell them, hey man, you don't buy your tires until we're done. Until a week after you close, you can drive on those bald tires. It's going to be a-okay, right? Don't even walk into RC Willey. They're going to scan your retina and check your credit. Don't even do that, right? Don't do that. Thanks to the CFPB, the buyers know the fees they're going to pay prior to walking into settlement, right? There's that loan estimate form we know about and the closing disclosure that have to match. Okay, if there's any change, the lender has to disclose it. Buyers should know their fees. They should be more educated than they used to. Okay, so ask for a loan estimate. If you're going to do seller paid closing costs, this is my recommendation. Rather than just pull a number from the air like 3% or $5,000, talk to their lender and say, how much money do you need for this loan? How much money can they use? Put that on the lender. What we'll see sometimes is the buyer's agent will ask for too much and the lender can't use it all. And that extra money ends up going back to the seller when it could have been used for maybe something else. Maybe a more robust home warranty, maybe some sort of other seller concession. Ask the lenders what they need to use for. So we're going to go through this Dodd-Frank stuff really quick because we've already kind of talked about it. The CFPB is part of the Dodd-Frank Act. Okay, they're in charge of all consumer lending, including Well, home mortgage financing. So if you've been doing this long enough, you probably remember that FHA used to be their own kingdom, and VA and Freddie and Fannie. Now all that government bureaucracy is under one roof. And they started to change things on our end. One of the things they did was the closing disclosure forms in 2015. After the buyer gets their accepted offer, they're going to get that loan estimate form, and the title commitment is going to be updated, and then you're going to be able to read these things. So here's a disclosure form for a buyer on a commercial transaction. Okay, the seller disclosure form for residential properties, boy, it's 16 pages now, isn't it? Remember when it was like 5 pages and now it's 16 pages? It's a lot longer. They should probably review it. Now, how many of you send those forms to your buyers and you know for a fact that they never open the email and they never read it? It's one of those things that happens, right? As a listing agent, boy, and a buyer's agent, it can be a little bit tricky because you have some institutional knowledge, and it can be easy to cross that line from advisor to giving them legal advice or tax advice or something like that. It's kind of a hard thing. I recommend that if you have questions about, am I crossing the line here with telling the buyers or the sellers this information, you talk to your broker. Okay, and maybe the two of you can call the legal hotline. It's just up the street here. If you're paying dues to the association, to the UAR, you have access to that legal hotline. Just make sure you're doing it. A home warranty company loves this slide. Order your home warranty before the day of settlement. Some home warranty companies will actually do listing coverage. That's great if you're a seller and you want that in place. But get that in place. We have some realtors who will come to the title company and will say, hey, who did you want to order the home warranty from? And they'll say, I don't know, just pick one. And you know how title companies, I'm going to let you in on the industry secrets. Do you know how title companies choose the home warranty? Whichever home warranty company has come in the week before and said, if you give me 3 home warranties this week, I'll bring your office lunch. Now, that's great for the title company, for the escrow officers and their assistants and the secretaries and receptionists and things like that. But is that the best way to choose a home warranty for your client? No, probably not. At the point of an accepted offer, everybody should have this general stuff. The complete contract, every addenda, the seller disclosures, the home warranty. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little industry secret. Are you ready for it? Title companies are de facto document storage companies. We've been that way for a long, long time. So when you send me something at the title company, guess what I do? I keep it in our file. And we don't have file folders. I mean, we still do, but we're not using really file folders anymore. It's all stored electronically. So I don't really need from you like your exclusive right to sell or your buyer broker agreement or your wire fraud disclosure form. I don't need any of that. I don't need your Form 10 or your Form 12. I don't need it. But here's the fun thing. If you send it to me, I'm going to keep it. And 10 years from now, when someone calls you and says, hey, I need a copy of the contract from when I purchased the property, guess who's going to have it? We will. Guess who won't have it? Your real estate agent or your broker, perhaps you, because real estate agents and brokerages, isn't it 3 years? I think it's about 3 years. That's the extent of them holding onto your file. After that, it's gone. Now, every year around first in January, and then for the latecomers in April, we get calls from folks saying, I need to know what I purchased my property for because I sold that property last year. I need to figure out the capital gain for my accountant. Okay, can you imagine if they didn't have access to their settlement statements anymore? Because they call their agents first, and the agent might be like, this is 5 years ago. I've worked at 3 real estate companies since then, and I have no idea, right? Now you get into EXP, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to stay here forever. But still, the title company holds the documents for you. Okay, so July 1st, Backbend's launching a portal for all of our new orders that will allow you to keep that transaction you have with us online, and those documents will be there for you to pull down anytime you want to. And that includes any documents that you submit. They'll just be there forever as an agent, which is kind of a great thing because, again, not everybody's going to hold on to those things, and nor would I want to. Can you imagine the liability that your broker has in keeping all of your documents together? That's something that no one talks about. What if someone breaks into your broker's system or into their filing cabinet, if they're that type of broker, and just steals all the real estate documents for your settlement? I wouldn't want to hold on to those things. At the title and escrow company, we're already taking on that liability. Make us your document storage company. I mean, we're doing it anyway, right? That's a little bit of advice. I love it getting commission instructions, especially in this new realm. I mean, July 1st is the day, I think, right, with that NAR settlement, where buyer commissions might be more variable than they have been before. We're lucky in Utah because it's always been a thing, right, that you're disclosing commissions to the buyer, and the buyer might be responsible to pay those commissions outside of a seller's side. So sending commission instructions is a great idea. Not only send them to the title company, but make sure they're stored. Make sure you have those. And that's another reason you're doing a seller net sheet, and another reason why you should be privy to that loan estimate and closing disclosure form that's prepared by the lender to make sure your commissions are correct. Approaching settlement, we're going to get mortgage payoffs and HOA payoffs from your seller. A lot of times they're not going to want to give us any information unless we have a borrower's authorization that's attached to that email. And some mortgage payoffs are really easy to get. Like for Chase, for example, they're making their payments to Chase. I can go on their system on the phone, I can type in the numbers, and I can hang up my phone. It'll appear in my fax machine or my email before I even hang up the phone. It's that quick. For others, it can take up to 10 business days. Boy, I know of one lender in particular, it's a reverse mortgage lender. They'll send it to you within 10 business days. But the only way they'll send it is through the regular mail to the property address. Isn't that kind of crazy? We can't even get anything out of them online. So if you're working with Novad, good luck. But those things take a little bit of time. Yeah. We don't take verbal payoffs anymore. That's one of those things. Another thing that happens with home equity lines. This is a fun story. I was doing a settlement. We had a payoff on the first mortgage. We had a payoff on the home equity line, the second mortgage, and I'm demonstrating that to our seller. So, okay, here's your payoff on your first, here's your payoff on your second, here's how much you're getting following closing, and they were all good with that. And then like the third document after that was, here's the document to freeze and close your home equity line. And they said, you can't close my equity line. I said, what are you talking about? I said, no, that's what I'm going to use for the down payment on my next house is that line of credit. They didn't understand that that home equity line was tied to their home. And that sounds kind of funny. It's in the name, right? For whatever reason, it didn't register. Now, keep in mind the listing agent here, right? They'd also been helping them try to find a home to purchase. And all the while, they had been telling this listing agent, I have $60,000 down payment. I have $60,000 down payment. They were counting on using that home equity line in addition to the money they got from settlement. Now, does $60,000 affect their purchasing power? Yeah, I walked out of the room. I was like, are you kidding me right now? How does this happen? How did they not know? That's something that happens sometimes. Settlement's easier when costs and fees have already been disclosed. So this is easy, right? We figured this out with a net sheet. That's your first disclosure. When your offer has come in or are submitted, your escrow officer can do those estimated settlement statements. By the time that your seller gets the settlement, boy, they've seen these numbers 3 or 4 or 5 times already. They're going to be experts. It's going to be a lot more simple, a lot more fun, to be honest with you. Okay, settlement's easier when the sellers know what documents they're supposed to sign. So if you've ever done a closing for someone who's an accountant, anybody have those analytical folks who have to read every page of the closing documents? If you haven't, boy, it is a treat, Engineers are another one. Like my wife's family, half of them are doctors, the other half are engineers, and I'm the black sheep who married the daughter. That's okay though, we're getting over it. If you have someone who has to read every form, ask your title company to submit the forms to them well in advance of closing so they have a chance to read through them. If you're going into settlement and you're one of these analytical folks and you're going to want to read everything, that's uncomfortable for everybody else who's used to having people just sign. And I would rather have them have all the time that they need in the whole world to review the documents, be able to answer the questions that they have. It just makes things go so much smoother. The worst closing, well, I guess it's 1A and 1B because I already told you about that buyer who never qualified. On a seller side, though, I did a favor for another escrow officer at Backman. They said, hey, can you do this closing for me? It's a seller side. The house is free and clear. He's kind of coming at 3:30. It should be easy. That was what should have tipped me off. I said, of course, have him come in. So at 3:30 on that Thursday, the seller came in. It was just a single guy. He was the only one on title. No payoffs. So I met him at the front desk with the real estate agent. And at the front desk, I said, hey, I'm Tucker. Let's go ahead and move into the closing room. We'll get you in and out of here. And he says, well, can't we do it right here? And I thought, well, that's kind of a weird question. His expectation when he came in was he was going to sign the deed and we were going to hand him a check. Now, why did he have that expectation? No one knows. Who's in charge of prepping him for what goes on at settlement and closing? Well, probably our fault a little bit as the escrow officer, but also the agent shares some of that responsibility. So we go in and we sit down, and I can still picture it. It's a table just like that's in this room. I'm on one side, he's on the other side, and I show him the settlement statement. Very first thing I said, "Here's the settlement statement." And he says, "Well, what's this for?" And I said, "Well, this is kind of a receipt. It shows where all the money's coming to, where all the money's coming from." He's like, "Okay." So we start on the settlement statement, and keep in mind, there's only like 6 charges on that whole thing. Right, there's a tax proration, the title escrow fees, and the real estate commission. That's it. And we started at 3:30. We got through the settlement statement at 5:30. He asked for a calculator and paper. He didn't think that our computer figured out the tax prorations correctly. It was a thing. At 5:30, his agent, the listing agent, looks at me and says, "You know what? I got to bounce. I've got another appointment." He left. He left, and we only had a few more things to go over. We had to do the warranty deed. We had to do the IRS 1099-S form, and there were some FHA VA documents. We were there till 6:30. 6:30. Now, a lot of it was spent on the 1099-S form. Because, you know, when you're an individual who sells property, boy, I have to collect that information as a title company, or for me, every bit of data that I'm missing that I don't submit to the IRS is a $350 fine. I don't know if you knew that or not. It's a fine to the title company if they don't submit it correctly, $350 per bad thing that you've done. Ask me how I know. Yeah, right. I know it's $350. So I was like, okay, I need your forwarding address. No, you don't. Yes, I do. And I knew the questions on the back page. At that time, he had not sold another property. It wasn't a rental. Believe it or not, at this time, the sales price was under $250,000. It was just a little house back in the mid-2000s anyway. Things could sell for that now. Now we're not that way. And he wasn't doing a 1031. He didn't buy it with a 1031. I wasn't going to report anything to the IRS as far as capital gains. I knew that already. But again, it was, you don't need my forwarding address. And the big thing was, you don't need my social security number. I don't have to give it to you. Boy, that's a thing, because actually I do. I do need that. And we went back and forth a few times. I said, hey, if you don't give me your social, I can't fund the file. I can't give you your money. He says, you're telling me if I don't give you a social security number, you won't give me my money? I said, yeah. He says, well, you have me over the barrel. I said, no, I don't have you over a barrel. I just can't give you any money. So, and you know my reaction to that? I wasn't angry with him. I wasn't upset with him at all. The poor man, you know, to have to live in that headspace. I was a little bit upset at the agent, because did the agent know what kind of guy this was?
From day one.
From day one. And I should admit this, but I had to know. Like, I drove by the property on my way home that night, and dude had put tinfoil over all the windows. Like, I don't know if he thought satellites were trying to read his dreams or something like that. He just lived in this paranoid state of mind. The poor guy, right? All this time I'm thinking to myself, if you would have just told me, I would have sent him all these documents weeks in advance. He could have gone through and done the research and figured out, yeah. Or he could have called me multiple times to ask about every charge. It would have been so much better for the poor guy. I felt bad. I felt bad for him. So settlement should be a review of what the buyer already knows. We know that because they get that loan estimate and they get that closing disclosure already, and those things match. Again, emphasizing one more time, sellers should have the same privilege. They should know what their costs and fees are in their bottom line before they go in. Okay, we know the contract deadlines with that 3-day rescission period and that 3-day for the CD. So again, if you're gonna have your settlement on Tuesday, Wednesday, probably means the CD from the lender needs to go out on Thursday or Friday. Okay, because Saturday counts as a day generally if it's not a federal holiday. The fun part about this form when it first came out is lenders would say to us, don't give the real estate agent a copy of the CD. You guys remember those days? Realtors can't have a copy of the CD. But do you know what was on the CD? It had your name, your license number, your email address, and your phone number. So one thing that Backman started doing, I think most title companies do this now on their escrow general provisions. You know that document that's signed at the very end of things that talks about what a title company does? Most of those will say, and you can give my CD to my agent. It's just part of normal course of action. One of the funny things though, with the closing disclosure, this is the one for the seller. This is the model form that they put out. What do you notice? Is there a signature line there? On the seller's closing disclosure that comes through the software, and the one that they put out at the CFPB, there's no signature lines. And even when a seller signs it or a buyer signs it, look at what they say. By signing this form, you're only confirming that you've received this form. You don't have to accept this loan just because you've received the form. Now, the reason being is it's mostly a truth in lending document. Okay, it's telling them about their interest rate and their fees. It's truth in lending base. And again, the seller side didn't even have a signature line. We had to go and add one as a title company. Okay, it's the title industry. So it's kind of weird. We used to have the HUD one and the truth in lending, right? And those were two different documents from two different areas of law, from Truth in Lending Act and from RESPA, that Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And you would think when they redid everything here, they would just make one document that complied with both areas of law, but they didn't. We have this Alpha settlement statement that you guys probably see. This is the one that should be sent to the agents most. I think it's easier to read anyway. I prefer it. It used to be legal size, now it's letter size. But let's look at it. There's some for buyers and there's some for sellers and there's some that disclose both sides. Remember that top line that says, hey, as a buyer, as a seller, I don't have to receive or agree to anything. That's not RESPA compliant. The settlement statement says, I reviewed it, it's true and accurate. I further certify I've received a copy and we authorize the title company to disperse the funds how it's outlined. So that's why when you get a commission check, if your title company is putting a CD in there, technically they're not complying with RESPA. You have to have a settlement statement in order to comply. It's just one of those things. On that CD that will come through and that settlement statement, it goes over title and escrow fees. For a long time, I can remember when I first started at Backman, we had 6 fees for a seller. Because, you know, it was a closing fee and doc prep and a FedEx fee and recording fee. You know, there are all these different things. Well, in 2015, we're like, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? It's been over 9 years. We just have a settlement fee most of the time. That's it. And it includes all these other services. I did a closing for a lady. She was an escrow officer down in Las Vegas, and she had to buy a property up here in Utah. So she's up here visiting, and I get to be the escrow officer doing the closing. And she's looking over the settlement statement. I'm like, do you need me to explain any of these documents to you? And we laughed about it. She's like, no, let me see the settlement statement. And she goes, hey, you're missing your notary fees. She's doing me a favor. I said, oh, we don't have notary fees here in Utah. And she laughed. She's like, because where I work, it's $20 every time I put my stamp on a paper. They would add $20 for a notary fee every time that they stamp the documents. And I thought to myself, man, I'm a closer in the wrong place. On an FHA transaction, if there's 16, just think of those. Whoa, wow. Anyway, those are those things. We have recording costs. I want to spend a bit of time on good funds and wire fraud. So with your wire, I know you have that wire fraud attention form that buyers and sellers sign. I love that form. We still have buyers who are wiring money to the wrong place, where email is being hacked and they're going to wire money wrong. As a real estate agent, it's great to have that form signed. Please go the extra step to say, I will never send you wiring instructions. I just won't do it. Okay, your lender will never send you wiring instructions through email or through text or any other way. The only way you're going to get wiring instructions is in person at the title company. That's really the only way to combat some of this fraud is it's in person. Now, That sounds wonderful, and 85% of the time that works. There's another 15% of folks who are going to have to get something emailed to them, right? Don't be the agent who emails the wiring instructions. Don't take on that liability. Make your title company do that through secure email channels. The scary thing is, back in December, we had a couple who had sold their house with Backman, done the closing with Backman. They were living with their parents because their new house was under construction. Okay, it got to a point where we knew when they were going to have their settlement and closing on the new house. So the real estate agent that evening, the evening before, says, hey, we've confirmed settlement, the final inspection is going to be done this date. Let's close your loan on this date here in December. It was like December 15th or something like that. What no one knew is that the real estate agent's email had been hacked. Okay, the bad guys had gone into their system. They were monitoring every email that realtor was sending. And they had set up rules within their email that says, if any email says wire closing funds, it would send it to this address. So is that a little bit scary? The next morning at 6:30 in the morning, the buyers get an email. And that same email chain, it looks like it's coming from the same email chain. It says RE, right? It's just a reply. And it looks like it's coming from their agent, but when you looked at the agent's email, they had added 2 extra letters to the domain name. It's like Fred Smith Real Estate. It was Fred Smith RE.real estate, something like that. And then they've done the same thing for Backman Title, our escrow officer's email, and the same thing for the lender email. So in this reply all, it looked like the lender, the title company, and the real estate agent were all involved. It just said, hey, in order for this to happen, we need $40,000 to the title company before closing. Can you do that today? And 10 minutes later, they get an email on that same chain from the fake escrow officer saying, yep, that's right. We need your $40,000. Can you do that today? And the buyer responded about 7:30 in the morning saying, yeah, I can do that on my way to work. Send me the wiring instructions. And on that same chain again, wiring instructions come. Now that couple had already closed with us, right? We had already talked about all this wire stuff, like, I'm going to get your instructions to send, be very careful. They had signed that form twice as a seller, and then again as a buyer, they had signed that form. Did they have any idea that they were dealing with somebody trying to hijack their funds? They had no idea. So they go that morning with the fake wiring instructions. It was going to some bank in Oklahoma, where Backman doesn't do any banking in Oklahoma, right? It said Fred Backman Trust Account. Who the heck is Fred Backman? Oh, there's no Freds at our company. They knew us. We thought. They walked into their credit union. When the credit union opened, they handed those fake wiring instructions to the teller. Did the teller bother to call us to verify the wiring instructions? No. And they put the wire in to go out that day for $40,000. The only thing that saved us was the buyer then went to their car and called the real estate agent and said, hey man, I just sent the wire. Just wanted to let you know it was already done. And the real estate agent said, what are you talking about? He says, you emailed me this morning. It was really early. I thought you must be on your way to the gym or something about wiring funds. He's like, this isn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. The realtor calls our escrow officer and says, hey, did you send wiring instructions to such and such? And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, they were still in the parking lot of the credit union. They walked back in and had the wire canceled. And then they emailed everybody to their correct email addresses, hey, this transaction was almost hacked, right? Or we almost sent money to the wrong place. And who was it who got hacked? Was it the lender? Nope. Wasn't our buyer seller. It was the agent's email that had been hacked. So think about this from an agent perspective. If you're the email that gets hacked and you're the cause of them losing the $40,000, who has the liability, civil liability? You do as an agent. How many agents have $40,000 or heaven forbid $500,000 for a wrongful wire? Almost nobody does. So when it comes to this wire stuff, I can't stress it enough. We escaped in this situation. That $40,000 was almost gone. After a wire's been sent to a different account, do you know how long you have to retrieve it? if it's bad, 3 hours max. After 3 hours, they've already cleaned out that account and it's gone somewhere else. It's a dangerous thing that's happening. So with good funds, we've trained everybody to say, hey, let's wire it. Wire is the best way to go. And it probably still is the best way to go. Okay, if you want something to happen the same day, it's pretty much the only way to go. Okay, unless it's for like less than $500, we can't deposit that the same day and fund on it. So again, when you're dealing with buyers and sellers, the only way that you transfer money is with an in-person thing. And even when you get to the bank, make the teller or the bank or credit union manager call and verify the wiring instructions. Because the title company is not liable if someone's email gets hacked and you send the money to the wrong place. But you might be as a real estate agent, especially if they find out your email's not secure. Does that make sense to everybody? Oh boy, yeah, we have I hate to plug, but we have a 1-hour class about how to make your stuff secure. We can talk about that another time, but I wanted to share that story because when it comes to good funds, I mean, it's so dangerous right now. It's so dangerous right now. So again, my name's Tucker. This is our last, I think, boy, how early are we? Boy, 12:15. Oh man, how soon before lunch gets here? That's another question. He's coming here early? Okay, nobody leave. Let's let them do that. If you have any questions, give me a call, text, or email. We can do that. Continue working with your title company in Utah. We have great title and escrow professionals, not just at Backman, but everywhere. We have an abundance of talent here in the state. Use those seller net sheets. Okay, get your sellers here prepared for closing. And if you have questions about properties, ask the professionals. Ask your escrow officer escrow questions. Ask your title officers the title questions having to do with the real property. Okay, do we have any questions from anybody online or anything like that? Probably not. Again, if you're watching on Zoom and you want CE credit for Utah, make sure you put your license number and your email address into the chat. I'll make sure that those things get connected today. As soon as I bank your hours, you'll get an email or a text from me that has our webpage at Backman Title that has all these resources, including those net sheets, a copy of the slides, a bunch of the checklists, and that HOA Bill of Rights thing is going to be attached there as well. Okay, for that, Jeff, I mean, I'm done. Maybe I talk too fast, but that's it.
All good. I'm surprised there's no question going on.
I'm going to tell you something. You kept making me think of experiences I've had.
Oh yeah,
Only once did I go to closing and the seller changed her mind. She didn't want to sell it.
At closing.
At closing.
And the buyer, of course, sued her.
And probably won.
Yeah.
We had a lady in my neighborhood. We didn't do the closing, but she did the same thing. Property was up, went to sell. She changed her mind, didn't want to sell. The buyer sued her for performance and won.
How long does that take?
It was about a month and a half before everything settled out. There really isn't. I mean,
Actually, they're kind of.
once you're done, you're done. Do you want this back?
Yeah, that's fine. You can take that off. Guys, on Zoom, we do have a sponsor coming in. I was gonna talk to you, but I don't know if you want to stick around. I don't know how long he'll be.
He said he was gonna be here till 15.
Nathan, good to see you. Amy, April, thanks for sticking to the end. It's good info, good stuff. It's a lot. Amy's a brand new agent. You just confused the hell out of her.
That was great.
No,
Maybe unmuted herself, but I can't hear. Sorry, Amy. I don't have a speaker on. You can turn on your volume.
Well, we'll answer some questions here if you have them. And the main thing is, hopefully you know what questions to ask now. And working with a good escrow officer is kind of key to this. I mean, having a good team that you can rely on, great escrow officer, great lender, it's a big deal. It really is a team. It's a team sport.
You know, my friend Eric was talking about that just the other day because his sister-in-law was his escrow officer.
Yeah.
She moved to Texas.
Oh, it's the worst.
But for years and years and years, he's like, oh man, working with the lender, it's so super important, right? The other agent, this and that. He thought title was just, you know, there's
Everybody
title
was the same, yeah.
because everything was so smooth until she moved. And he had to find somebody else, and he's like, holy shit, this is important.
This is one of those things.
There's a lot, well, like anything, there's good and bad agents, there's good and bad lenders, there's good and bad title, there's, so you gotta find a professional.
So where I'm at in Davis County, in the last 2 years, we've had 3 really good escrow officers retire. Who are just, they didn't work for Backman, but you knew them, you'd worked with them, you've done split with them. So the latest lady's Carrie, Carrie Champion's her name, if you've ever dealt with her before. Carrie is a great escrow officer. She retired, man. It's a detriment to the industry because even though she wasn't on Backman's team, she was a great professional. She's going to be missed, and you hope your escrow teams are like that where when they're gone, it's hard. It's hard for sure.
Need a plan B.
We chose her because her husband is an engineer.
Yeah, and he can do the engineering work.
We had an actual engineer, buyer who bought Taylorsville, like, this is gonna be perfect. So we used her for some specific people we're helping sell right now. And they were like, well.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, right?
Interesting, you worked on one, but.
We have a lady who worked with Carrie who just came to join us after she figured out that Carrie had retired. So she just started with us last week, and I'm like, that's tough. Even coming to Backman where we have great escrow officers, when you lose somebody like that, it's hard.
I think she's been doing it like 30 years or
Yeah.
something. So.
Yeah, she's great. A long time ago, well, it's been 10 years now, there was an escrow officer in Bountiful called Marilyn Carr, and every old school real estate agent in Bountiful used Marilyn Carr for good reason. She was such a good agent, and when she retired, there were a bunch of agents who were just lost. We were just lost for a while. She was a great lady, great lady.
Yeah, Carrie came with us. She hopped in our car and we drove up to Logan and met some people who were coming down from Barlow to Starbucks, and she did it there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the closings I remember doing, it was 8 o'clock at night in Logan in late January. And we were gonna meet at the Walmart, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, there's a McDonald's at that Walmart, we'll just go to the table. It was an old farmer, it was like, I don't know, 20 below or something. I'm like, hey, should we run in and do the closing? Like, no, let's just do it here. He put down his pickup truck. And I'm wearing this light jacket, just going, and here's the open statement. Oh, it was great. It was great.
He was good.
He was fine.
He was all weathered.
He's like, I'm like, hey man, I'm a little heavy, but I don't have that. I don't have 2 inches to help me stay. I'm not walrus sized yet, but yeah, those are the closings you remember. Those were fun.
Good stuff.
You could probably tell a lot of different stories of your closings. I had one with a respite problem. I think it was the buyer or the seller, I can't remember, was related to somebody in the title company.
Oh,
The seller wanted this title company and the buyer wanted this title company. Anyway, that was like 25 years ago. But anyway, we had to go to RESPA over the whole thing.
yeah.
It was crazy.
Yep, about people being able to
'Cause
choose.
nobody would back down.
Yeah. And Utah, by the way, you should know, Utah's weird because we can do split closings here. Most states don't allow for that. I mean,
Yeah, it's just common for us,
You're
because
just-
most of them are split.
yeah, most things are splits here, and it works well because we have people, like Carrie who just retired, or Marilyn Carr, who I told you about, who are great escrow officers. We're doing splits all the time. You go to California, there's no split. You go to New York, you're not splitting stuff there. Utah's weird that way.
Yeah, we were just on
It's
TV
weird.
this morning, Sean Taylor was saying up in Oregon, same thing.
Yep,
They don't have that option.
yep, and you don't always get to choose as the agent. I mean, that can be hard too. You
Yeah.
feel like you're out on an island.
No, it's so much easier here. When I was in Idaho for 25
Oh,
years.
Idaho.
We had to worry about wells, we had to worry
Mhm.
about septics, 300 feet back from the water, you couldn't have that septic tank. I mean, it was crazy, and I had to go to all these things too.
Yeah, you had to
To
be
make
present for all
sure
the
they were taken
inspections.
care of.
Yep. Idaho, they still don't have a standard REPC or real estate purchase contract in Idaho. I don't think they have one. So when I do stuff at the Cass Rich Association, the agents who are dual licensed in Idaho or Utah, I'll say, well, what do you do for contract? And they'll take the Utah REPC, literally cross out Utah, and they'll put Idaho on it.
Really?
Because up there, I mean, if you're an agent for, a different brokerage, that brokerage has their own purchase and sale agreement. And you go to a different brokerage or a different builder, they have their own.
Imagine getting a different rep fee on almost every transaction to review.
Oh, I can't
Oh,
imagine.
yeah.
Yeah.
Standard is good.
I helped one of our clients, he had a vacation rental up in Island Park, which, good for him, right?
Yeah, right.
They finally got to a point where they wanted to sell it, and, he was doing for sale by owner. He's like, I don't even know what to do with the contract. I just said, hey, take the Utah contract, cross out Utah, put Idaho. You send that to the title company up there. They're gonna be glad to have that, because our contract here is so specific about who does what and who's responsible for what. And again, we're spoiled.
With legal issues and stuff, why is it you think they haven't adopted a standard?
I just think it's quote unquote the Wild West up there. And you think in the state of Idaho, I don't know that they're the problem. It might just be an industry thing where they've fought with each other for so long, no one wants to do it. There's things like that, and there's issues in every state. Like in California, I just read an article the other day. They're just getting around right now to digitizing and centralizing all their water right information. I mean, in the state of Utah, we looked at the map, right, on our slides. You can click on it. In California, there's no central clearinghouse. The water rights are all private handwritten records across all these various agencies. No one knows what's going on. It's crazy.
I had to go, I went to Duchesne to look at their records once. I got some land out there and I went to the adjoining property owners where it was a trip. Looking through all those actual paper files and pulling out the plat maps, the big ones. And
the big ones, and flipping it
asking
over.
for copies of stuff, and it's interesting.
I had to go up and record some property. Well, no, this wasn't in Duchesne. It was in Carbon County, and I had to wait until the file funded, right? Like it had to be one of those that day, and they needed to know right now. So I drove out in the morning, and I'm sitting there in the lobby just waiting, playing on my phone. Luckily they had Wi-Fi. And I go in to hand record a document, and everybody had gone to lunch. There was no one there at the county. I had to wait for them to get back. There was no one at the recorder's office. So about 20 minutes later, the recorder walked back in and said, oh, sorry about that. We usually don't have any walk-ins. I'm like, that's okay. It's just kind of a weird
We
deal.
usually never see any real people.
Yeah, there's no real people here.
Is your office in Layton?
We've got one, my office is actually out of Bountiful. We have one in Layton, Ogden, Bountiful, and, down here in Union Park, Lehigh, Provo, and St. George.
Is it by Red Robin in Layton?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly where it is.
My buddy just opened a business right there.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Help Insight, so he does VO2 max, just metabolic rate and DEXA scans.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah. I was at that Red Robin the other day, actually. I'm heading to Layton after this.
That place is awesome.
Yeah, it's hopping, man. Who knew Red Robin, right? Like, we had a gift card, and so my wife's like, all right, let's go to dinner.
How are
Hey,
you?
Good to see you.
Awesome. So is Christine working out of the Layton office?
She's out of our Ogden office, yeah. Christine's a great lady. I didn't know her until a few days ago. She's so much fun to be around. She's great. We're really excited to have her.
Now, are they keeping that early office open?
I don't know what the plan is. Yeah, she wasn't sure either.
What Pearl is doing?
So is Perla the assistant for Carrie? I haven't heard anybody's name mentioned specifically, and I don't know for a fact. Last I heard, the
Benjamin,
rumor
come on
was
up front here.
he might get a job outside of the industry.
We're just shooting the
We
shit
would
here
love
for a
to-
little
we would
bit.
love
We
to
got
have
done a
you
little
here.
bit early. Nice to meet you, man.
Awesome. Yeah, good
I'm
to
Jeff.
see you.
So you're, stand right there where you are and tell us a little bit about you. We got a contact slide right there. I think they can hear on here.
Okay, awesome. Great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys already got that all on there, so
Yeah.
that's perfect. Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me over here.
Yeah, thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
coming.
Yeah. So you guys have been in space for a while, or you guys been?
Yeah, we've been here since 2019.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's fun. It's all in the Marchant. Is this the family?
No, we're with EXP, so
Okay.
this is my family's office, but we have agents all over, even in other states.
Cool.
There's still some on Zoom. 2019, people came in person more often than they do now.
That works. Well, I'm not as familiar with doing virtual things, so I will say
That's
hi.
right, just to look at.
It's great to just look at you. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I am, I gotta get some practice, I guess, on this. So, But yeah, so I'll just introduce myself and let you know a little bit about me and then what the business is. So my name's Ben Barlow, and we provide a window cleaning service. That's the main service that we provide. And I'll go a little bit into me first. So I'm from Farmington. If you guys have ever been there, I've got a wife and two cute little kiddos. So I've got a toddler and I've got a baby. So
Nice.
if you guys have ever been in that stage, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I love outside of window cleaning. I love skiing. I'm a rock climber, and so I guess this is a good job to have, is climbing roofs and getting getting on ladders. And then I'm kind of a handyman, but a very ghetto handyman. So if you find wood in a dumpster, I'm probably there grabbing some wood and then building.
I can build something out of that.
Build something, build a fun little wraparound bench around my tree in the backyard so I can have some shade. My wife's, I don't know if you guys like sun, but being a window cleaner, you don't want to be in the sun after you're outside. And so I was able to have this nice shade spot while my wife had dinner outside in the sun.
In the sun.
So I'm okay with that.
You could see each other.
Yeah, I'd wave from about 30 feet away, so she didn't want the shade and I didn't want the sun, so. Yeah, so the business, kind of where it came from, I started off as a bucket bob kind of business. As I mentioned, taught ski lessons and absolutely loved it. It turned out that a lot of ski instructors were also window cleaners for some reason. I don't know why, but I think that one reason is spring, summer, and fall you clean windows, and then the winter time we do still clean windows in the winter, but yeah, it's definitely slower for most window cleaning companies during that time of year. And I just knocked doors basically. So I learned from my buddy for a couple weeks. I grabbed my brother-in-law and my sisters. They did a little bit of window cleaning, but it was basically just a wooden stick and very basic stuff. And I started cleaning windows. So that was in 2017, and then 2020 started bringing on some employees, and now we have about 37 to 40 full-time employees, and we're in Utah County, Salt Lake City, and Davis County right now, and a very small team in St. George. If you ever go outside of those areas, we'll probably be expanding to those at one point. Yeah, it's been really, really cool. I think that doing business, as you guys all know, just to relate, because real estate agents, you guys are doing the same thing. You guys are doing business and growing it, and it's a humbling and challenging and fun, and also you can say every single part of your life it's a big thing. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned is learning to lean on other people, because we have a really, really cool team at Galactic Cleaners. So we've got really good setup on the back end, really good operations. So as for our services, so we do more than just window cleaning. I will mainly focus on window cleaning, but if you guys have other things that you guys ever want to work with, we're happy to do that too.
Because you're a handyman.
Well, yes, exactly. So yes, I no longer take on weird jobs. I've taken on some pretty funny jobs in the past, but if you want me personally, I can help. So it's not going to be for the business though. So
what other things
we do? Gutter cleaning and pressure washing, dryer vents, air duct cleaning. So yeah, so the air duct and dryer vents are good for winter time. So it works really well. Our business, we have over 700 reviews. They're all we're like a 4.8, 4.9, somewhere around there. And we are we just want to provide the best quality service we can. And so our goal when we work with real estate agents is we want to provide the best experience when you are either working with somebody to buy or sell a home. We want to be able to provide a really frictionless experience. So that's why we have hired on the best people for the office back end to make sure that things run smoothly. We provide a really high-end training for our technicians, so they know exactly what they need to do to reach certain levels, and we'll only bring them on if they meet those levels and standards. And when we work with you, we want to create that experience for your clients, so they are just thrilled whenever they work with you. And we can work in multiple ways, basically. So when we're doing the service, we can approach it inside and out. We can do any building or any size of home, because we have all sorts of tools when it comes to cleaning the windows. And we can also approach it in a unique way for you guys. So if you guys wanted to, I'd love to meet with you individually. You can scan this code here, and you've got my number and my email here as well, so you can reach out to me. But I'd love to set up an individual meeting where we can customize way that we can approach working with your clients. And I'll just kind of give you some examples of how we could do it. So one is we could almost like a punch card. So kind of a funny way to look at it, but if you refer a certain amount to us, like 10, I'm thinking just in my head, if we service 10 of the customers or a certain amount of revenue that we were able to get, it could be as low as 1 potentially, but probably like 5 is somewhere in that range. We can work it out where we clean your guys' home for free. So be kind of a cool way to do it is if you guys have a home, I'm assuming you guys do, if you're agents, we can do that for you, or you can provide it for your clients. So you can provide a free cleaning for your clients as a way to say thank you. I know some agents will kind of build it into their costs or just as a thank you. I know a lot of times you'll do that where you'll have a gratitude thing, and window cleaning is an awesome one. You can offer it for free to the client, and then we would, because we did the initial service, normally the initial service is more expensive. Because we work with you, we can give you preferred pricing where we can give you really good deals. And then following that, if the client decides they want to continue to work with us, because all of us need to have windows cleaned. I'm guessing all of you either done it yourself or maybe hired somebody before. Have you guys, or do you guys leave them neglected? I mean, either way, it's a cardinal sin for me to hear that. It's okay. So you don't have to raise your hand if you do. So, but I was just saying, like, yeah, either way, we will give them the best rate we possibly can to make sure that they are wanting to work with somebody long term who's giving honest feedback, who's going to give them the best quality service, and that's just what we're about. So, any questions for me?
Doing windows before a listing photos is a good thing too.
Yeah,
A lot of people will clean, well, not everybody, but a lot of people will clean the house real good, but the windows, look like.
It makes a huge difference. You don't realize until you get your windows cleaned, and then
Yes.
you walk into a room and
Mhm.
it's like, oh my
It just
god.
goes to the feel of the house. I mean, people buy a house, houses emotionally, so if they walk into a dirty house, it's just like, they can't picture themselves living here, it adds to it.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, the first time impression, I probably didn't give a good impression to my wife when I met her, but I don't know, like you gotta have some kind of good impression when you meet them, and same thing, you're kind of when you're buying a home, you've gotta have a good impression. If a window's bad, you might think about what other things are they maybe not taking care of potentially. And the other thing is, when you're cleaning when the windows are cleaned, oh, I had a thought. And I can't think of what it
I'm
is.
still thinking about how you made a bad impression on your wife and she still went out with you.
Still went out with you, that's good, Jim.
Well,
Yeah.
she didn't have a good smell, and so she didn't smell me, and she's also blind. So no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I'm sorry. I mean just she's no. It's good. So, let's call it there. So let's call it
If
there.
you've got a Barlow last name in Davis County, you're doing okay.
Yeah. So
There's a lot of
Barlow's.
famous Barlows in
Yeah.
Davis County.
Yeah, Israel Barlow. I am from a polygamy line, so but that's ways back for me. But But yeah, there's a lot of Barlows.
Yep,
so,
I've known several Davis
Yeah.
County Barlows are all good people.
Yeah, that's where I'm from, so, but yeah, keep me posted, guys, if you guys wanna meet with me one-on-one and, have a conversation, I think there's a link on here as well to my Calendly, so you're welcome
Where
to.
is that QR code?
So that takes them to the Glide,
Website?
but,
Oh, yeah, I can get that over to you guys
Okay,
then, and-
yeah, send it over
Yeah.
to me and I'll make sure to send it.
awesome, okay, that's great.
Super cool. Thanks for coming in, Benjamin.
Yeah.
Thanks for lunch.
Um,
We had some people cancel coming in person
Oh,
today, so.
that's okay, for those who were in Zoom, you can come get some food over here.
Yeah.
You guys are missing out, so.
Cool. Thanks, Benjamin.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah.
Hey, guys, shutting off Zoom. We're
Thanks,
gonna hang out
everybody.
here for a little bit.
Did you bring any cards or anything?
Oh, I have my,